Hello everyone and welcome to today's session on data-driven supply chain. I'd like to start by introducing today's presenters, Andy Birtwistle, Director of our Supply Chain Practice, and Adrian Downing, the Director of our Healthcare Practice. A recorded version of this webinar will be available and sent to your email afterwards. We'd love to hear from you, and if you have any questions, please send them through and we'll try to answer them at the end of the webinar.
Okay. Hi everyone, this is Andy Birtwistle from Concentra. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is the context of businesses being digitalized, the impact of that digitalization on supply chains, why it's important now for supply chains to become data-driven, and the value and the benefit businesses can get from that. First of all, let's just consider the context that we're in. We are at the beginning of a new industrial revolution. Businesses really are considering digitalizing their businesses, which means they're considering how they trade, how they capture information about their customers, how they deliver product to their customers, how they track the performance of their business. In fact, every aspect of their business, data is being used to monitor processes and how they're operating. Now, this will have major implications on supply chains because no doubt the service requirements are going to increase, the different routes and channels that people want to provide products to customers will increase, and on top of that, probably diversification of the portfolio will happen. There'll be more and more variations of products, and the world will become more competitive, so there'll be pressure on the supply chains to reduce cost even further in that context. So the world, if you think the world of a supply chain manager is difficult now, I think it's only going to get more demanding as time moves forward. But businesses need to prepare for that and set the foundations in place and make sure you've got a solid base of business processes, and make sure you're operating efficiently and effectively now before you start moving into this new world. And generally, where are supply chains at the moment? Well, over the last 10 years, there's been a tremendous focus on cost reduction within supply chains. And as a result, supply chains have lengthened. Businesses have sought to find lower cost sources of materials, or indeed lower cost sources of manufacturing for their own factories and their own products. And as a result, the supply chains are now extending all the way around the world because the customer market stays where it is and the supply points just extend. On top of that, businesses have often also outsourced part of those operations. So previously, they may well have had complete control because they were vertically integrated from source material, manufacture, and distribution and delivery. Now, though, most elements of those are outsourced, and companies are just focusing on a key aspect of that full supply chain where they can really add value. So the world of digitalization is driving greater demand for service, and it's putting pressure of cost on supply chains. That's causing them to extend and maybe be outsourced. The whole problem of managing supply chains is becoming harder and harder. And if you're going to manage something, you need information visibility. You've got to be able to see what's going on so you can manage it. And the difficulty of capturing that information is also increasing because of the fragmentation of the players within the supply chain. And it's not only within difficult to get information from your partners in the supply chain, it's actually also quite difficult to get information from the parts of your supply chain within your own company, because systems quite often just are set up so that the data is held in these functional silos. You tend to have your sales data in a sales system or held in a way that suits the sales process. You'll have logistics information held in a logistics information system. You may well have data separately in a manufacturing system, and the information about supply and receipt of goods from suppliers may just be held in procurement systems and order systems. So there is just because you are looking at the processes that you own, it also doesn't mean that you can necessarily get good visibility of how your own internal supply chain is performing, let alone the extended supply chain. So businesses need this information visibility, but it's actually quite difficult to get hold of it. But where is the value in the supply chain, and where are the issues? Well, they tend to be in all those boundaries. They tend to be in the boundaries between commercial and supply chain, or supply chain people who are managing inventory and factories, and again between the manufacturing company and the supplier. It's all in the handoffs. So as those different functions or different players in the supply chain have tried to become more efficient because of cost pressure, they've quite often caused tension in the handoff relationship between the two parties. So it's just some examples, simple examples. If you want to reduce inventory, then you'll probably want to ask your manufacturing provider to reduce lead times and produce smaller batches. Now, if the manufacturer wants to reduce costs, they probably want to level demand onto the factory, which quite often will mean extending supply chains. They've got a greater horizon to play with to level the demand. And also, they tend to increase batch sizes to them, so they're making fewer changeovers and reducing changeover costs. So there's a direct tension in the supply chain between those two parties. And that happens throughout the supply chain. But it's in these handoff areas where there is also trapped value. And the aim of the business, if they want to improve the holistic supply chain, is to really try and align all of those handoffs and set the policies or the agreements between those functions and between those enterprises so that the business is aligned to the way it wants to compete in the marketplace, whether it's a cost-focused organization and you just focus purely on cost optimization, or whether it's a quality-focused business and it's going to compete in the market with quality, or whether it's a service-focused. So you need to align your policies and the way you interact with each other across your own functions and across your supply chain partners in line with the way you want to compete in the marketplace. And that's where businesses need to set those rules of the game and make sure everyone is following the same rules. So there is a great need, and there is lots of hidden value and opportunity in aligning the business around the way the business is competing in the marketplace. And the supply chain manager is a key player within the business who will help the business align. And to do that, the supply chain manager needs lots of information and needs to be able to analyze these trade-offs and handoffs. So you need to be able to analyze any of those aspects, and if you're going to change one element, if you change the batch size, or you change the portfolio in some way, portfolio of products, or you change the bill of materials in some way, you need to understand the implications on the other parts of the supply chain. So there's implications across all aspects. So if you're considering managing demand and you want to improve forecast accuracy, and that will take more effort, well, maybe that will have an impact on operating costs because you want to either invest in a better system or have more people. And there's a trade-off to be managed there, whether you're going to invest and it's worth it because of the benefit you think you can get, or whether there's a simpler way of improving forecast accuracy, but maybe not getting the optimal accuracy and stability of forecast, but with a lower cost. So there's trade-offs to be managed all the way through and decisions to be managed all the way through. And the only way really of aligning the organizations around those decisions is to be able to do the analysis. And so that, I think, is where analytics can help you break out of functional silos, help business align by analyzing the situation, analyzing the impacts of all those decisions and policies across the supply chain, and therefore help the business compete in the marketplace because you are then have an aligned organization and an aligned set of supply chain partners all working towards a common aim. Now, another aspect of business management that will improve greatly from having analytics and having the data at hand is the decision making. And if a business can make decisions quicker, more confidently, and actually make better quality decisions, then obviously it's going to improve faster. So if you can pull together all of the information you need to analyze your complete business and your complete supply chain, and have that information at hand for strategic planning, strategic decision making, tactical decision making, operational decision making, and then the same data used to manage the detailed execution processes, then you really are going to speed up the way the business changes, because people have facts at hand, the analysis they require, they'll be able to base their decisions on that analysis, and they will be able to make decisions more confidently. Now, the type of decisions that businesses need to make are in the strategic horizon, just the management of the network, how many factories, what is the role of the factories, where those factories should be located, the number of suppliers you should have, again, where those suppliers are located, and the role of those suppliers in your supply chain. And then based on the overall demand picture, what is the level of utilization that you want? What are the capabilities and capacities you want in your supply chain? So that requires a lot of information, and it requires information to be held at the right level of detail, so you understand the cost trade-offs of different options. So having a complete set and a complete model of your business will dramatically help that type of information, that type of decision. Then nearer term, you will be resolving capacity issues given the infrastructure decisions you've made. You'll need to know about and identify capacity misbalances where you've got peaks in demand and you're not able to meet that demand in a certain period at a certain location in the supply chain. And then you've got options on how you resolve it, whether you build stock ahead of time or whether you change the source of product temporarily to deal with the surge in demand or the peak in demand. So you'll need information at hand. You need to know the scenario. You need to plan scenarios, create scenarios, and understand the cost implications of each decision and broader implications of those decisions, and have a model of the alternative so that the decision maker can make the decision with confidence. And again, that requires the high quality data and a good model of your business. And then similarly at the operational planning level. At this level, you're aiming to synchronize the activities in the supply chain so that the rate of manufacture and the rate of supply of products is aligned with the rate of sales of the product, and that the supply chain activities are happening in a very aligned and synchronized way. But also, in doing that, you need to be considering the cost and efficiency of the supply chain. So are you gaining control of the demand and creating demand plans and laying demand onto your factories and your suppliers in a way that will help them be efficient? So have you got control of that demand signal? Are you making sure that the product will flow through the supply chain as you want, but also are you helping the suppliers and manufacturers and the operational functions within the business to be efficient? And you need to have the data to understand all of those things so that you are making a balanced decision for the business. And then finally, at the execution level, that's where you're focusing on accuracy of execution and efficiency and cost efficiency. So you'll be scheduling activities in the way to deliver the lowest cost outcome. So you make products in the right sequence so that the changeover cost is the lowest, order on suppliers so that, again, they can work in an efficient way and deliver efficiently to you. So it's all about the cost focus. But you need to understand those costs, and you need to have good information about the impact of your alternative scheduling decisions. So data and good models and a good understanding of your business will dramatically help all decision making throughout the spectrum, right from detailed scheduling decisions right through to strategic decisions. And if all of those decisions are based on the same data set, then that will really help to align the business and drive value. And then on top of that, and on top of supporting that decision making, if you've got the data and the analytic capability, you really can drive business process improvement, because you will be able to analyze the detailed activities that happen in your business. You'll be able to analyze the processes, see whether they're executing accurately, executing in a very consistent manner, so that there's little variability of time and quality of the outcome of those processes, so that you can then remove buffers in the supply chain. So process analysis using data can drive great value. You can see whether people are working in the right way, making best use of their systems, and then adding the value that the human can add above and beyond the systems. You can analyze the demand, understand demand profiles, challenge the way profiles of demand are hitting the business, and find out the cause and start to level demand onto the business. And again, that will help it be more efficient. And you can build up analysis to show opportunities that lie in the business, and then model scenarios so that you can present those to decision-making bodies to make the decision on how they want to set the supply chain up so that it can perform in a better way. And then when you're piloting new ways of working, again, use the data to track the projects. Are they implementing things as you intended, and are they getting the results you intended? So being a data-driven organization with analytics and data at hand really can help you not only make decisions quicker and make better quality decisions, it can also help you analyze the way you're working and drive improvements quicker. And then the final thing that analytics and becoming data-driven can help with the business, it can actually help with communication, because you can create charts like the ones I'm going to show you now, which will help communicate issues in the business. So I've got some examples from our SupplyVue product. And this one is just the profile of demand, the spikes being the quantity that's ordered each day. So you can see how variable the demand is on that supply chain, and that's difficult to deal with. So if you can show that, you can then question and understand what's causing it, and then maybe you can find actions that can help level the demand, which will help everyone in the business, and it will help the supply chain to be more efficient if it doesn't have to deal with big peaks and troughs in the demand profile. You can use charts to show how processes are performing over time. So this one's whether the forecasting process is adding value above and beyond what a statistical tool would do. Would a statistical tool actually create a more accurate forecast than the current forecasting process? And if it can, you need to understand why, because you really want the forecasting teams and the people who understand the business to be working in a way that utilizes the statistics, and then on top of that they add value. They add knowledge that the system can't know about. And the result should be a forecast that is always more accurate than the system alone. So you can just use some simple charts to show people that actually maybe we're not working in the best way, there's some opportunity. And then you can show people whether the demand is being controlled up the supply chain. So this is just a chart to look at the bullwhip effect in the supply chain. Is the demand that's propagating back up the supply chain smoothed, and is it more level, and therefore is under more control, so that the factory can actually operate more efficiently? Or, as in this example, the orange line is the sales line, and then the line graphs are the profiles of demand that were placed on the factory and then placed on the supplier further up the supply chain. So in this example, you can see that there's much greater peaks and troughs in the demand profile that's being placed on the suppliers and factories. And that's just bad for the business. It's bound to add cost, bound to add inventory, and it's one chart. It can prompt the organization to look at its planning process and work out how it can get control of that demand signal so that it can still satisfy the demand, but actually do it in a lot more efficient and effective way. And then just another example. This is whether processes are conforming to plan. Are factories doing what they should do each period? Are suppliers supplying what they should supply each period? And if the two bars are level, it means the data showing that the process is executing against a plan, or as in this example here, you'll see that the two bars, the thin blue line and the broader bar, aren't of the same height. Therefore, the facility isn't following the plan, it isn't executing against the plan, and therefore it will cause alignment problems within the supply chain. So when you measure these things, you can highlight parts of the network which aren't executing as they should do, and that's where you would investigate and try and correct. And then another final example, which is quite a good one, it's showing, this one is showing whether there's potentially any opportunity to reduce inventory. So the blue line is the daily level of inventory, and then the orange bars are the actual daily sales that that inventory is supporting. And in this example, the lead times and cycle times into this warehouse were quite short, so there was no need to carry so much inventory. And it's just visually the difference between the height of the orange bars and the blue line shows there must be some opportunity to reduce inventory. And again, it will just align the business around agreement that there is something to be investigated and potentially an opportunity to reduce that inventory. And a final thing that we like to do with the data is show the KPIs around a full process. So this chart is just showing the key measures associated with the forecast to stock process, and you can, on one chart for a particular supply chain, see whether all aspects of that process are working, or if the KPIs are sort of traffic light in nature, whether there's a process that's not on track or one that needs looking at. And at a glance, if these KPIs are color-coded, you'll see which part of the supply chain needs to be examined, whether it's the forecast accuracy, the plan volatility, the production conformance to plan, or whether there's an opportunity in inventory. The KPIs presented in this fashion, you can very quickly see which part of the supply chain process you need to look at. So it will just help with communication and help quickly get agreement within the business that there's a particular aspect of the process or supply chain that needs to be examined because there's potential opportunity there. So I think wrapping up and summarizing the key messages, there is a new world coming where businesses are going to be data-driven. They're digitalizing their processes, the way people order, the way you track, and the way you interact with customers will be digitalized. There'll be whole new channels in the way businesses are communicating with their customers. That's going to put a lot more pressure on the supply chain. Supply chains are currently extended and stretch around the world. I doubt if that will change because cost pressures are going to continue. Therefore, you need information visibility, and therefore your supply chains need to be data-driven. And not just from that need to be able to manage the supply chain, I think there's a great advantage in becoming data-driven because you can really improve your decision-making because it becomes a lot more fact-based, and therefore you can make decisions with a lot more confidence, and you can create a learning organization as you make decisions using those facts and using that analysis. You can see the outcome and see whether the outcome is what you expected to get. You can align the organization because you can communicate better using visualization charts and align the organization around issues and get agreement quicker that there are aspects of the process or parts of the supply chain that aren't working so well, and then you can use the data to analyze those processes and find opportunities to improve step by step. So I think there's a whole host of reasons why you'd want to become data-driven, as well as the need of the changing world. And a key aspect, though, is that all parts, whether it's senior managers, middle managers, supply chain managers, or people executing on the shop floor, they all need to use the same data set. And so to get benefit from your data and to align the business, you really need to make sure this new culture of being data-driven is embedded in the business. And my colleague Adrian, who has done a lot of work with helping organizations becoming data-driven and embracing the need to use data to drive their business performance.
Andy, thank you very much indeed. First of all, I'd just like to get you to think about really what the NHS does. So I look after the healthcare practice at Concentra. Arguably, the NHS is one of the most complex supply chain systems, because not only is it got over 10,000 equivalent factories from GPs through to hospitals, it's also got an incredibly complex logistics problem whereby it uses over 5 million ambulance journeys per year. And even during a single journey, that destination may be changed because the priority of that journey is amended, becomes something more complex, or an individual's need is greater. So we've been looking at how organizations use their data and embed that in, be it from supply chain through to just other operational reporting. And what we've actually found is that where you improve the access to information, there is quite significant benefits for organizations, customers and their shareholders as well. And those are around 7 benefits and common themes. One is around the alignment of the corporate strategy, so that you are much more focused as an organization to understand what is going on, make the right decisions, and then monitor what's going on. An awful lot of organizations believe that board directors fully understand what has happened, is happening, and will happen. But very often they are having to use guesswork based upon gaps in the information. You can also improve operational efficiency, and also even just helping employees to understand what they're supposed to be doing and when they should be doing those and where they should be doing it. You can become much more innovative, and the employees become engaged in that innovation as well. Where you can improve customer satisfaction, it enables you to get feedback on what you're doing, and also then to keep improving your product development as well. Where the organization is stuck in silos, it makes it very difficult for people to collaborate. And if you can get people using the same information, arguably as real time as possible, then you can create a much more effective way of working. Also, you can start improving your risk and issue management through this transparency, because people are looking at the same information. I think one of the things that we've found at Concentra, though, is that there is not a significant amount of quantitative benefits from achieving this, and it's going to take a period of time, especially in the NHS, to actually determine that of these 7 areas of benefit, what is the true benefit to each of the organisations, its customers and shareholders, from a speed or a financial benefit. So we have been working and have developed what we called a data-driven organisation readiness framework that enables organisations to start to determine where they're having the biggest blockers of trying to focus all their energy on information that is being provided to them. One of the biggest failing points we're still seeing at the moment is that organisations see data as an IT project. We're finding that success comes more readily and is much bigger when it's considered and run as a business transformation program. We believe that there are 8 areas that you need to be ready. One is it's strategically ready, so that there is a clear link between data and what the organisation is trying to achieve, and therefore what people are doing on a day-to-day basis. That they are commitment ready, so although they're saying, yes, we want to do this, the culture is aligned to that, and there is actually longer term budget is committed to it. So rather than just seeing that it is a one-off cost, they're actually putting longer term commitment into continuous improvement and enhancement of what they are doing. The people are actually ready. There are sufficient number of individuals, apologies for a problem with the slide there, that there are the right number of people in the right roles who are properly trained and rewarded appropriately. One of the areas of the biggest blocker in the NHS is they are not necessarily rewarded appropriately based upon their skill set because of very rigid pay scales. The users are ready, and so that they are educated, trained and supported. And this is very much a regular process that you need to go through to make sure that they are re-energized as you go through this. The customers are ready, and so that you understand what they want and what decisions they may take. The data may be ready. So it is not just around data quality, it is all around how you actually think about what structure and what you're actually going to use for that data. Your processes are there, and your systems. So this is an overview of around 135 interviews across about 50 organizations. Not necessarily all of these are in healthcare. And we've asked them a series of questions to try and determine how ready they are. And this doesn't actually mean it's an absolute answer to what people need to focus on, but it's really trying to get people to think about, these are the areas that I really need to resolve, otherwise I'm not going to make progress. So those 8 areas are listed in front of you. Where it is red, we are considering it as a barrier. So people in the questions, they've indicated that there is a significant problem there, and without removing that problem, they're not going to make any progress. The green line indicates where they're making significant progress, and one of the key themes that we're finding in the health service is that although people are saying that they are strategically ready and they're incredibly keen on doing this, and their commitment is there, when you start looking at the aspects that enable you to deliver on that commitment, organizations see that the barriers are much greater than how they perceive them to be ready. And so what we tend to then start working with people on is trying to build up a business case to break down each of these barriers to move the green line above the value of the red line. So I'm just going to very briefly go through each of these. We have 4 questions that we pose to each organization against each of these 8. And there is a level underneath here that enables you to then start in much more detail, understand how far along you are on this. So in regards to strategic readiness, it is all around, is there a clear link between the stated objective of the organization and the data and the decisions that be based upon that? Has variation across the business been taken into account when you're trying to implement this? Do people understand what the benefits are? Can they be quantified? And also, don't just create a KPI and then just stick with it. Actually make sure you continuously adjust it, because the business will keep changing. And also ensuring that there is somebody who's got analytical leadership in the business. In the NHS at the moment, there are a very limited number of chief analytics officers, both in post and even being advertised. So there are probably only about 3 or 4 of significant individuals in the UK. In the US, this is slightly more advanced. So from a commitment readiness, is there really engagement? And this engagement needs to be from the chief exec downwards. There needs to be transparent actions that are taking. There is no point in actually developing a series of dashboards if you're then not prepared to action on any poor performing areas of the business. One of the key themes that we believe is going to happen is what we're terming as the management reversal. Individuals who are the analysts, they are seeing more information than anybody else in the business. Therefore, we may well see in the future a change of, instead of downward decision making, we're seeing upward awareness making, so that the analysts are informing the operations individuals so they can actually take action prior to a board even being aware of it. And also making sure there's future budget available. This is not a one-off approach. System readiness around the networks, the hardware, the software, and also the security and policies. This is a very large and significant problem in the NHS because of the complexities of patient identifiable information. Also around the software, there are so many different products that are out there that actually can handle different data sets, and making sure that the data model that you're putting in place can actually respond to the needs of the business. People readiness. Making sure that the structure of your organization is aligned to be able to deliver what is required. You've got the right number of permanent people with the right skills. Again, one of the issues you have in the NHS and a number of other sectors now is an increased use of contractors or temporary staff who actually may well be enable programs or projects to accelerate, but actually it doesn't help them embedding it within the organization because they very often leave without a full handover that's taking place because of budget constraints. Understanding and making sure that your team has the right skills and actually they're rewarded financially and non-financially. So a lot of individuals now are starting to want much more defined career paths. There are very limited career paths in pure data science, people are starting to term it, or as analysts. And one of these areas we see that people will want that continued development to be able to remain in post. Users, one of the most critical areas when you are rolling out anything to do with data and analysis, ensure that you have your internal communications team heavily involved at the very beginning. If people do not understand why you're doing it, how you do it, and what decisions are going to be made, you won't get engagement with them, and therefore it won't be as successful. I'm a huge believer that there is a big difference between training and education. Training is very functional. Training, if a blue light flashes here, you press number 1. Education is, if it flashes, you press number 1, then you go and speak to somebody and you understand why you are speaking to them. And that has to be a core element of when you're rolling this out. Ensure that there are multiple support points in place and you have super users so they can do that. And make sure that you energize and keep ensuring that those individuals who have had something told to them or understood that it's reiterated to them through multiple channels. At the moment, most organizations are starting to understand what data their customers want. Unfortunately, most of the time they're stopping at that point because they do not think that the customer will then go and do something about it. Where you are contractually obliged to deliver on something, if you are providing them information about that delivery, it is very likely that your customer will take action if you are breaching of that contract. Therefore, you need to understand not only what they want, what actions they may take, the risks that create, and what is that response to the difficult questions. Because the more and more data that you put out and give access to people, there will be more tricky questions and they will come much faster. Ensuring your data is ready around the data quality, the data structures are correct, you've got the right sharing agreements in place, and that there are specific data security policies. A number of organizations have very different opinions about data quality. Some think that you should just start rolling out and improve the quality of the data as you go along. Other organizations will not start to roll out until they are almost 100% certain that the data is correct. And finally, around the process readiness, making sure you've got the mapped processes so that people understand where data comes from, where it feeds into, so that they can understand the context of what is taking place. Instead of creating a black box, make sure that you don't hide the critical calculations and people can actually challenge what's going on so that you can keep improving it. Where you have operational KPIs, try and focus on a limited number. When you start hitting 10, 20, 30, 40 KPIs, they're no longer KPIs and they're just performance indicators. Focus on the top 10, resolve those issues, then move to the next and keep adjusting those. Make sure that you're using metrics that you can actually do something about. And the final one is making sure that you are tracking the same information that your regular may track on you so that you have advanced preparation for that. Finally, if you have any questions, please pose them through to Andy or myself, and we will answer them as best we can. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Adrian. We have a few questions already. The first one is for Andy, and the person is asking if it's possible to get all the data you need and how hard that is.
Okay, yeah, so the data that we take exists in businesses because it's the transactional data that has to be there. And the way we work with SupplyVue is we have a specified data format that we require, and you can extract the data from your underlying systems, whether they're common systems or different different versions of ERPs. You can get the data out. With modern tools, it's quite possible to transform that data into a standard specification, and then you can load it into a single tool. So the data does exist, it has to, and it's also now, with all the modern tools, very easy to extract data, to extract that transaction data. And because you're going for data in the lowest level of detail, that's when you can create the aggregations and the cuts and the slices and the views of data that you need. Using a tool like SupplyVue, you can then build up the data into the data models that you want to support the decision making that you want to support, create the KPIs that Adrian was talking about, and also then analyze the processes in detail, because you've got very detailed information that you can track how performances are working over time. So it's all very possible nowadays.
Thank you, Andy. And the next question is for Andy again. Do you need to have moved to a single ERP system in order to do everything that was presented?
So in terms of whether you need a single standard ERP system, I actually think using a tool like SupplyVue and taking data out of underlying transaction systems, it probably even avoids the need to spend a lot of money and time standardizing your ERP systems, because again, like I said before, you can get the data you want, you can pull it into a single source. If you need to align some master data, you can identify exactly which pieces of master data you want, work on those, maybe create some standard definitions. So maybe there's a bit of data alignment if it's coming from different systems, but the transactional systems can be consolidated. And so without going through very expensive and quite often quite lengthy ERP standardization and rollout programs, you can create the very valuable analysis and visibility that you want, even though the underlying systems aren't standard.
And we have another question. I've worked with some of the major CPG companies, GSK, Coca-Cola, Emerson, as business consultant. Most of my assignments were reliant on data building applicational strategies. In the current environment of how relevance and importance of data is becoming prevalent, what advice would you offer to individuals like me to add more and more value to the customer beyond supply chain knowledge?
I think one of the most important things is actually how to embed it into the organization. So going back to the slides that we showed just now, it's having an understanding of what people want to do, aligning that to corporate strategy, and then ensuring that the individuals are ready to use it and they can use it in the most effective way. So it is beyond supply chain. It's understanding and aligning what information can do for an organization, understand what the benefits it can give, and ensure that it's embedded. An awful lot of organizations start trying to implement a data strategy, but they make it an incredibly short-term approach rather than thinking about in 3 or 4 years' time, this is going to enable us to do X, Y, and Z.
Great, so there's no more questions. Thank you all for attending. We will send you a link to the recorded session, and you can have access to the slides later as well. And if you want to know more about everything that we spoke about today and about SupplyVue, those visualizations that you saw in the first part of the presentation are from SupplyVue. You just go to our website, www.supplyvue.com. Thank you so much for attending, and bye.